I got pregnant with a boss's husband. You can demand as much in alimony as you want. Ava's words made Rodriguez and me exchange glances. What did Ava just say? Did she not say the boss's husband? Ava, still wearing her sarcastic smile, was looking at our faces. I had thought something was off for a while, but had she finally lost her mind? Or was she hiding something else, something outrageous from me? Wait, the boss is your sister, right? Replacing my stunned silence, Rodriguez spoke up. At first, I couldn't grasp the meaning of his words. But, seeing Ava's reaction to what Rodriguez said, I began to get the picture. Excuse me? Ava's expression froze instantly in response to Rodriguez's words. I never thought him to be this pathetic, but Oliver had been posing as the boss all along. Believing this lie, Ava married Oliver. Oliver was a smooth liar. He probably explained things to Ava in a way that made her misunderstand who I and Oliver were. He must have done this to get close to the beautiful Ava. Now it made sense why Ava had married Oliver so easily. But let's get back to the story. Indeed, I'm Sophia Brown. I'm the boss of this company. I'm a 37-year-old single woman working in IT. Due to some circumstances, I'm living alone. I have an older sister named Ava. And though it might sound biased coming from me, she's quite beautiful. We weren't close as children, and I always envied my friends for their kind sisters. Ava was always pampered because of her beauty. And maybe because of that, she grew up to be cunning and unpleasant. She was adept at blaming her misdeeds on me, and I even found it scary how skilled she was at it. As far as I can remember, Ava was never scolded by our parents. They always seemed to excuse her behavior, saying, "She's the older sister, after all." Ava remained true to her own desires, and on top of that, she perfectly played the role of a kind sister in front of our parents. While our parents never openly compared our looks, relatives and others did, leaving me with a deep-seated inferiority complex. The phrase "big sis" is a real beauty, stuck with me from a young age, continuously fueling my feelings of inferiority. When I reached middle school, boys, too intimidated to approach Ava, would come and see me. And they would invariably say the same thing. What? The sister isn't cute at all. Ava found this amusing, enjoying her further idolization. I suffered a lot under these perceptions, but I knew Ava's true nature. I understood more than anyone that she was just a person with a beautiful appearance, but shallow on the inside. I believed Ava would eventually hit a dead end, so I started focusing on my studies. I was certain that someday, our roles would be reversed, no matter how long it might take. With that conviction, I excelled in school, always at the top of my class. Eventually, I grew bored of the regular curriculum. So I decided to focus on computers, looking ahead to the future. Despite the objections from those around me, I boldly decided to pursue my education at a vocational school. I felt confident in my knowledge of general subjects to a certain extent. Therefore, I desired a focused educational path. I easily got admitted to the vocational school. Perhaps because it was a school for studying computers, I made a lot of like-minded friends there. They were the so-called geeks, and I fit right in with them. At the school, I learned a lot about web design, site construction, and programming. After graduating, I moved through a few companies, but now I'm working with my vocational school classmate, John Smith. John and I had been close since our school days, and he was an outstanding programmer. After going through several companies, we ended up working together. A few years later, I started dating a man named Oliver Wilson, who worked at the same company. Oliver was experienced with women and knew exactly how to please them. I noticed he tailored his approach depending on the type of woman he was talking to. Having no prior experience with men, I was hesitant at first, but I started dating Oliver, who was 3 years my senior, following his lead. Oliver, who worked in sales, was charming and popular with women. I thought he wouldn't be interested in someone like me, and I was wary of men like him. However, Oliver managed to win over my heart and gradually made his way into my life. Only a few people at work knew about my relationship with Oliver, and we tried to keep personal matters out of the workplace. Even so, I found myself giving Oliver special attention more often than not. When Oliver made a mistake at work, I would naturally cover for him, so much so that John pointed it out. I knew this wasn't right, but I couldn't help being swept away by my first romance. When Oliver and I had been dating for over 3 years, he proposed to me. I hadn't expected things to progress to engagement so smoothly, and my parents were surprised when I broke the news. I've always been more focused on my studies and now work, not much into guys. They were thrilled that I, who had always been focused on studies and now work, was getting engaged before Ava. On the day of the meetup with my parents and sister Ava, to my surprise, Ava and Oliver hit it off well. Since they were going to be relatives, I thought their getting along was a good sign. However, this was my naivety and my biggest mistake. Despite knowing Ava for years, I let my guard down because everything seemed to be going so well. Soon after, Oliver broke off our engagement. He revealed that he was now engaged to Ava. I had never fully trusted Ava, but I never imagined this could happen in reality. I always thought having my fiancé stolen by my sister was something you'd only see in comics or dramas. But now, it was my stark reality. I later found out that Oliver had been flirting with many female colleagues at work. It was only natural for someone like him to fall for a good-looking woman like Ava. My parents were utterly dismayed by Ava and Oliver's outrageous behavior. They couldn't believe that Ava would steal her sister's fiancé, especially considering what the relatives and acquaintances would think. Despite their past indulgence, my parents couldn't forgive this. They were furious with Ava, but she didn't care at all. Meanwhile, unsettling rumors began circulating in my company. There were whispers that Oliver was deceived and dumped by me. It was such a ridiculous joke, I thought no one would believe it, but somehow, people at work started sympathizing with Oliver. Thinking the rumors were too ridiculous, my failure to properly deny them contributed to this outcome. Knowing my character, Oliver used this to his advantage, getting close to sympathetic female colleagues. After betraying me, Oliver got engaged to Ava and even continued his infidelities. Initially, everyone tried not to fall for Oliver's tales, but gradually, they were taken in and eventually deceived. The way people at work looked at me changed to something more mocking, and Oliver disrupted the office morale. Ava and Oliver, ignoring the feelings of my parents and me, went on to have a grand wedding. They even had the audacity to send me an invitation, which I obviously didn't attend. My parents had intended to keep Ava's actions a secret, but invitations were sent to relatives as well. Humiliated by their daughter, my parents shed tears of shame and declared they'd have nothing more to do with her. Some time later, Ava became pregnant. She even made a point of coming to me directly to announce it. "How does it feel? Your ex-boyfriend and your sister's child are right here. What are you feeling? Tell me," Ava said, smirking as she tenderly rubbed her belly, staring at me. She seemed to find pleasure in thoroughly hurting and breaking me. Ava's eyes gleamed with genuine enjoyment of the current situation. Realizing that my own flesh and blood was filled with such madness terrified me more than anything. Fear, rather than anger, spread through my heart. I was speechless, standing there in front of Ava, unable to say or do anything. Either bored or satisfied, Ava eventually left without another word. I knew Ava and Oliver would continue to torment me. Since breaking up with Oliver, I had become increasingly isolated, unable to confide in anyone and sinking further into darkness. I was adamant about not letting personal issues affect my work, but gradually, my body stopped cooperating. No, my body was fine, but my mind refused to function. I don't want to think about anything anymore. I felt an inner scream and found myself unable to go to work for a while. A few days later, I finally checked the backlog of calls on my smartphone. Most were from my parents and John. I had sent emails to report my absence, but only sent one-way messages, never fully explaining to John. Thinking about the disruption my absence might be causing at work. That made me feel even worse. Along with the missed calls, there were several messages from John. "What happened?" "I'll listen," he said. The messages sent by John contained nothing about work at all. They were all out of concern for me. I thought I had no one to turn to, no one on my side. But here was someone who cared about me. This realization made tears flow naturally. I couldn't continue like this. Shaking off the fog in my mind, I decided to contact John. Staying like this would only play into Ava and Oliver's hands. Glancing around the room, I saw it littered with instant noodle cups and pastry wrappers. "This is terrible. I need to clean up first," I muttered to myself, starting to tidy the room. "What happened?" John asked with concern the moment he saw me. After cleaning up, I called John. "I need to meet and talk," I asked for help. It was already past 10 p.m., but John graciously accepted my request to meet. At John's first words, I instinctively smoothed my hair. Had I looked that disheveled in my rush? Even in such a moment, I found myself worrying unnecessarily. John suggested, "Let's go inside," and led me into the cafe where we had agreed to meet. The place was almost empty, perfect for a calm conversation. We ordered coffee and began talking right away. I poured out everything about the past few days, how Oliver's spread rumors had made me feel out of place at work. Once I started, words just kept flowing. John listened intently, without interrupting me. After I finished sipping my coffee, John said, "Firstly, about the office situation, you don't have to worry. All of Oliver's lies have been exposed. His repeated infidelities at work too, without a single exception," he said, smiling confidently. I couldn't believe Oliver would admit to lying, and wondered what had happened. "Also, rest assured, I haven't spoken about your private matters," John added, seeing my puzzled expression. "No, what happened?" He nodded understandingly, seeing my confusion. "Why do you think the women employees Oliver dumped didn't say anything?" he asked me in a serious tone. As I looked puzzled, John continued. "He threatened them, saying they knew he was married and would be sued if they talked. Basically, he had warned that if they spoke about their relationship, his wife would take legal action. It was no surprise that young women would be scared by such threats. Oliver had been exploiting them to carry on his affairs. It's unforgivable." I clenched my fist on the table, anger building inside. But Oliver overplayed his hand. The women employees Oliver had deceived didn't speak up on their own. But they were quick to notice others who had also been involved with him. Was it a woman's intuition? They sensed something in the air between themselves and Oliver. United, these women were strong. A few of them eventually came to John and exposed Oliver's deeds. "We've been deceived and threatened by this Oliver," they declared in front of everyone at a company-wide meeting one morning. Their statement sent a ripple of shock through all the employees. "I'm being framed. They're just upset because I broke up with them. Please believe me, I've done nothing wrong." Oliver tried to maintain his lies even when confronted, unashamed. But who would believe Oliver, seeing the tearful appeals of these women? Mocking jeers began to rise from the crowd as Oliver made his pathetic excuses. "He hid the fact that he was married and got involved with me. The worst kind of cheater." The victims grew more heated as Oliver refused to admit his wrongs. John didn't try to stop them, instead watching as Oliver was harshly criticized. "Hiring someone like you was the biggest stain on my life. You can't even do your job properly, and on top of that, you've been causing all this trouble in the office. I've reported your misdeeds to the police, so you better be prepared." Normally mild-mannered John exploded in quiet anger. It's no wonder not just Oliver, but all the employees were shaken by John's wrath. "And you're fired. You bragged about being good at sales, but compared to other employees, you were consistently at the bottom. I'm telling you this for your future reference," John added, before announcing the end of the morning meeting. The employees dispersed like a scattering of spiders, leaving Oliver alone. Oliver's pride was shredded in front of the entire staff. "So, I fired Oliver in front of everyone yesterday. I might have acted without consulting you," John said, waiting for my reaction, though he seemed to already know what I'd say. Oliver had been exposed for having relationships with several female employees and blackmailing them. The victims must have been embarrassed to come forward, but they planned this to humiliate Oliver. It was quite a scene. John continued with a wry smile. "But the girls he hurt aren't stopping there. They've sued him for a substantial amount in damages and reported his threats to the police." While I was down, Oliver had been thoroughly defeated. "About this, I was wondering if you'd consider letting the lawyer handling this case take care of your situation with your sister and Oliver?" I nodded vigorously at John's suggestion, deciding to join the other female employees in suing Oliver and Ava. A few days after my conversation with John, I met Ava, accompanied by the lawyer Rodriguez that John had introduced me to. We decided to sue Ava and Oliver separately, based on John's idea. First, it was about my personal damages, how Ava had stolen my fiancé. Ava, looking blissful as ever, seemed even more pleased to see me. Unaware of her position as the sued party, she faced me with overconfidence. In our first meeting, Rodriguez looked at Ava quizzically and began. "Excuse me, but do you understand why you're being sued?" he asked directly, without beating around the bush. Indeed, I too found Ava's confidence eerie. Ava's smugness in looking down on me was clear, but considering what lies ahead, she shouldn't be able to keep smiling. In response to Rodriguez's words, Ava began talking in a ridiculously sarcastic manner. I ended up getting pregnant with the boss's husband. Demand as much in damages as you want. Rodriguez and I exchanged glances at Ava's unexpected words. What did Ava just say? She said the boss's husband? Ava continued to smirk at us, filled with sarcasm. I had thought something was off, but had she completely lost her mind? Or was she hiding something even more outrageous from me? Wait, aren't you the boss's sister? Rodriguez spoke up for me, stunned. At first, I couldn't grasp what he meant. But seeing Ava's reaction to Rodriguez's words, I began to understand. Excuse me? At Rodriguez's words, Ava's expression instantly froze. Yes, Oliver had been posing as the boss. I knew he was the worst, but I hadn't imagined he was this despicable. Fooled by Oliver's lies, Ava had married him. It's just like Oliver, who's good at lying. He must have explained things in a way that made her misunderstand who the real boss of the company was. He would have done anything to get close to the beautiful Ava. Now, the reason for their easy marriage was clear. But let's get back to the story. I am unmistakably the president of this company. This company was co-founded by John and me, where Oliver was just a trainee with little knowledge. John, as the vice president, supports me in my role. Later, I learned that Oliver was engaged to me because he coveted my position as the president. Not just the position, but he was after the wealth of a company with an annual turnover of $60 billion. Ava's arrival was an unexpected twist for Oliver, but he was quickly captivated by her beauty. She misunderstood that Oliver was the president when she heard the word while Oliver and I were together. Taking advantage of this, Oliver deceived Ava, and they even ended up having a child. I knew Oliver was a despicable person, but the thought of having dated such a man sends shivers down my spine. And I am frustrated with myself for not seeing his true nature. He lied about his status to fulfill his desires, even going as far as having a child. Unaware of all this, Ava was overjoyed, thinking she had struck gold. However, I have no sympathy for Ava, who was deceived by someone like Oliver. Even though she is my blood-related sister. You seem to be under some misunderstanding, but as you said, the damages will indeed be a substantial amount. At Rodriguez's words, Ava's strength seemed to drain away as she collapsed onto her chair. Concerned about her pregnancy, Rodriguez instinctively reached out to support her. I feel sorry for the child, but it's your own doing. This is the consequence you brought upon yourself. I said firmly to Ava, who was looking at me as if wanting to say something. Just because I now know the truth doesn't mean I plan to back down or forgive. Ignoring Ava's desperate attempts to cling to me, I asked Rodriguez to proceed with the legal process. Sophia! Sophia! Please, I was deceived! I didn't do anything wrong! Help me! Ava's anguished cries echoed in the law office of Rodriguez. After learning that Oliver was not the president but just an apprentice, Ava fiercely blamed him. How dare you deceive me? Just because you're a bit popular, don't get carried away. Without money, you're worthless. Don't ever show me that pathetic face again. Learning of Oliver's affairs with other female employees, Ava filed for divorce. And she also demanded alimony from him. Due to the charges pressed by his other victims, Oliver was convicted. On top of that, he faced multiple hefty damages claims. Oliver inevitably faced financial ruin. Until his prison term ended, Oliver's parents took on the responsibility of paying us the damages. Oliver's parents took this action partly as an act of contrition towards us, who were almost relatives at one point. This was the only solace for us. As a result, Oliver was completely ostracized by all his relatives, including his parents. Even after completing his sentence and returning to society, that's when his real hell will begin. He will have to spend his life bearing the burden of his sins, continuously paying alimony and child support. After settling Oliver's case, I sincerely apologized to the victims. I shared with them how I too had been deceived by Oliver and how my naivety had led to their suffering. However, none of them blamed me or spoke any words of resentment. They understood that we were all victims and I was not at fault. Hearing this, I felt ashamed of myself. I had let personal matters affect the company, withdrawn into myself when things got tough, and let Oliver run amok. I was grateful to my staff for forgiving me, and it was a wake-up call to get my act together. And I couldn't be more thankful to John, who handled these troubles alone while I was absent. Initially worried about my relationship with Oliver, he was genuinely happy for me when we got engaged. Despite not listening to John's advice and dating Oliver, leading to all this, John never blamed me. Instead, he took care of the victim's emotional well-being. I realized that John was far more competent than I, the president, had ever been. John always encouraged me, saying, "This company can't function without you," multiple times. Ava, divorced from Oliver, was in a dire state, not unlike Oliver himself. Shortly after, Ava gave birth to Oliver's child. I knew about Ava's childbirth because she repeatedly came to my house seeking support.
"Sophia, you're my sister, right? This child, your nephew, don't you feel anything for him?"
Ava would show the child to the intercom camera at the entrance of my apartment building. I had to be heartless, refusing her entry beyond the entrance, and even reported her to the building's security. Honestly, her constant visits were becoming a nuisance. Naturally, Ava also repeatedly begged our parents for help, but both adamantly refused her. Even after being shown their grandchild, their resolve to not forgive Ava seemed unshakable. Furthermore, I only came to know this after Ava ended up in such a situation, but it seems she had hardly ever worked before. Suddenly thrown into society nearly penniless, Ava couldn't expect the same assistance now that she had a child. Suddenly, she found herself in a near-penniless state, thrust into society. It was impossible for Ava, now a mother, to receive the same kind of support she used to. Cruelly enough, all the men who had been assisting her left her side without exception. Now a single mother, Ava had to work for the first time to pay for living expenses and the alimony owed to me. It pained me to think of the child, but Ava had no choice but to work from now on. Considering her past of looking down on others, the harshness she's about to face is unimaginable. Watching my estranged sister being escorted out by security on the intercom camera, I turned it off. After things settled down, I decided to thank John by inviting him to dinner. As far as I knew, John wasn't seeing anyone. But I couldn't help feeling awkward inviting him right after such a commotion. John, however, accepted my invitation without hesitation. We had spoken often at the office since then, but never about ordinary things. Probably out of consideration for me, John never brought up Oliver's topic. Instead, John diligently handled Oliver's aftermath and took care of the affected employees in my stead. Considering all these things, I had planned to properly express my gratitude today. "I'm truly sorry for not heeding your advice about Oliver and everything else," I began, intending to thank him, but apologies came out instead. As John said in front of all the employees, my involvement with Oliver was the biggest blot on my life. I felt like I had no face to show John, who had never trusted Oliver from the start. John slowly spoke up. "Let's forget about that guy. You are the victim, not at fault. And he is receiving his punishment, carrying his sins for life." John grimaced as if mentioning Oliver's name was distasteful. As he said, Oliver's fate was sealed without our discussing it further. I took John's words to heart and nodded seriously. "If it weren't for you, John, I wouldn't have been able to recover. And those girls who were deceived might have continued to suffer helplessly. Thank you for everything." I expressed my utmost gratitude. I said, bowing deeply to John. Watching me, John sighed deeply. "You've never listened to my advice since our student days." "Always." While cutting the steak that had been served, John murmured with a hint of irony. "We've known each other for a long time. Isn't it about time you trusted me more?" John said, looking intently at me as he casually tossed a piece of cut meat into his mouth. "Yeah, you're right," I admitted, feeling a sting from his words, unable to argue further. "To you, am I just a business partner?" John suddenly asked me that while I was looking down. Not understanding his intention, I answered on the spot. "Of course not. It's not just as friends, but we're inseparable in a way." I blurted out in denial, but then got confused about what I really wanted to say. "But you see, after this incident, it's clear you're too vulnerable for me to leave alone." "What?" I exclaimed in a ridiculous voice at his words. "Sophia, I want to be with you," John said seriously, cutting through our previous conversation. Even after lecturing me, this was typical of John, always like this since the old days. This was typical of John, always a serious and competent engineer but clueless about the mood. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his words. My laughter was almost a roar. My laughter echoed inappropriately in the quiet restaurant. Feeling the stares, I coughed to compose myself.
You say that now?
I asked coolly, causing John's face to turn red. But his feelings made me happy. He liked me despite seeing everything that happened with Oliver. Of course, I liked John as a work partner, but I also had personal feelings for him. I thought it was just affection as friends. It was rude and presumptuous of me, but I hadn't thought deeply about it until John said it. At this age, I laughed to hide my embarrassment. There was also fear in honestly accepting John's feelings.
Are you sure about me? After all that's happened?
I couldn't respond confidently and asked instead. Without a moment's hesitation, John replied.
That's a silly question.
And so, John and I became partners, both in our personal and professional lives. I felt embarrassed to mix personal feelings with work right after vowing not to. But I knew better than anyone that John was trustworthy. Having my life wrecked by Oliver and Ava turned out to be a blessing in disguise, leading me to John. I have no intention of forgiving those two, but as a happy person now, they don't matter anymore. It's best to forget such people quickly. John and I, now more experienced and stronger, will surely take our company to greater heights. I vowed to listen to John's opinions more and move forward together.